in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Got Snowball just about charged up, ready to get on the road, headed to South Dakota. This is 120 kW charger. I've never actually seen one of those before.
I haven't seen too many Florida plates out west, but a few. I've seen dozens and dozens of long trains filled with coal. South Dakota has huge coal deposits. It has a very thin overburden, which means it can be mined with big drag lines. It's only suitable for making steam. It's low BTU, not useful for making steel.
It's Sunday, August 29th, and I've just left Cheyenne about 15-20 minutes ago. As you can see from the dash, I have to shake the steering wheel a little bit. I'm heading to the supercharger at Wheatland, Wyoming. It's only about an hour, a little less. And from there, I'm going to get a good charge and head up to Rapid City, South Dakota. You can see that we are still in this enormous grasslands that made Cheyenne the epicenter of the cattle industry back in the days when the cattle industry was the most valuable industry in the country. And this is very pretty rolling prairie land, America's heartland. I can see why they call it the grasslands, and I can see why this area was the epicenter of the cattle boom back in the 1870s, 1880s, and still is. You can look all the way out to the horizon, and every single square inch you see is covered with some type of grasses or wheat. Lots of cows, rolling hills. I think it's beautiful. Let's just take a look here for a while. I'll give you a couple minutes of what it's like to drive through Wyoming.
Did you catch it? Here's what it said. It got my attention and I pulled off at the next exit. So this is the old Quebec 1 ICBM launch facility outside Cheyenne. It's part of a number of similar sites throughout Wyoming, which are commanded by the 20th Air Force, which is headquartered at Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne. For those of you in the service, you recognize Quebec as the phonetic spelling for the letter Q. Similarly, there's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, etc. Most of the facility is underground, but here's what you can see above ground. It consisted of a coded entrance. Most of the staffing was security forces. Most of the facility was underground, where there were 2 missileers behind massive doors. The commander was a first lieutenant, and the deputy was typically a second lieutenant. The Peacekeeper missiles were developed under Reagan's administration, when it was felt the Soviets had a distinct advantage in number of nuclear warheads. Wyoming was chosen for the location of these missiles because it's actually one of the closest points from the United States to the Soviet Union via a polar route. Even back in those days, there was some political and practical considerations for inclusion of women among the missileers.
And it moves on its own.
Balance,
It's perfectly balanced.
15 tons, huh?
Yes. So these pistons engage 6 inches into the wall over here when the wheel is turned. This door was to be closed at all times. This is what missileers would see when they came down for their shift. If a missile strike occurred nearby, it may well destroy our elevator shaft and floor. That way, when the earth is shaking in a missile strike, this space is still. Our equipment's not being tossed around. Our missileers can continue their work. So the launch control equipment building is.
One of the reasons the Soviets so feared the Peacekeeper missiles was its guidance system, which was accurate to within a few hundred feet. The Soviet missiles were hundreds of times less accurate than that. Looking through another set of massive doors is the actual command facility.
So welcome to the Launch Control Center of Quebeco 1. This is the space where they would have turned the keys had they ever launched Peacekeepers. So our missileers work a 24-hour shift, 24 on, 48 off. They go back to F.E. Warren in their off time. They call that the ripple. They are allowed to sleep 8 hours opposite one another. When they come on shift or when they wake up from their sleep.
After a launch command was received, both of the on-duty officers had to insert their keys. They were physically separated so that one person could not do both. As further protection against a rogue crew, at least 2 missile sites had to launch their missile in order for either to be active. The Nuclear Arms Reduction Treaty between the United States and the Soviet Union resulted in both sides giving up a number of nuclear warheads. Since the Minuteman was capable of having as many as 10 warheads per missile, the current Minuteman missiles only have 1 warhead, but there are still active silos across the country. I'm stopping at the supercharger in Wheatland, Wyoming. It's in the parking lot for the entrance. And I'm going to take a little stroll over to the Wheatland Travel Plaza. I decided to eliminate the Devil's Tower, which was featured in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but I suspect it's a bigger version of this. Driving a little further north, I went over the North Platte River, which is a very important river in the Plains Indians culture. I was in a town called Guernsey, Wyoming, so I popped into the local visitor center, found out that there's a dam about 2 miles upstream, which was built primarily for hydropower. While in the visitor center, I had a little photo op with a Western saddle. Doesn't look too realistic without a horse, however.
Okay, you're on.
All right, they're draining the lake for irrigation reasons. It'll be down to just a trickle next week. Nebraska's got to get their water somehow, so.
So this is as high as it ever gets here.
Yep, and it never gets any higher than this, so.
And then could you walk, I mean, how deep, could you walk across it when it's low?
Oh yeah, it'll be ankle deep. You can drive your Jeep down the river in another week.
No kidding.
Yep.
Amazing.
I made another stop at the supercharger in Wheatland, Wyoming. The manager at this motel where the supercharger is located told me that a number of years Tesla called and was looking for a site halfway between Cheyenne and Rapid City, and they offered to install the facility at their cost, but the motel provided the land with the expectation that it would be good for business. He said it hasn't worked out that way because there's a slightly better Best Western across the street, and since most Tesla owners are relatively affluent, they tended to charge at his motel and spend the night at the other competitor. However, based on what I could see, I thought the motel was charming and clean, and I would have no problem staying there whatsoever. You can see Snowball hooked up to the charger. Well, I'm about ready to cross into South Dakota. If you remember, I made this whole journey because I'd never been to South Dakota. It was the one state out of 50 I'd never visited. And after roughly 4,000 miles of driving, I finally got here. So in preparation for this trip, I read the book Crazy Horse and Custer by Stephen Ambrose. I've read most of his books, and I highly commend this one. It traces a lot of parallels to Custer and Crazy Horse. George Custer grew up in a modest family and went to West Point as part of his ambition to have a successful and socially prominent career. Even though he graduated near the bottom of his class, he was made a lieutenant general in the Civil War at age 23, primarily because he had no fear and was willing to engage any enemy at any time, whereas Lincoln was very frustrated with some of his officers that planned forever but would not fight. He was a charismatic figure who attracted a lot of media attention, and because of his success during the Civil War and then later the Indian Wars, he was actually talked about as a potential presidential candidate. Crazy Horse was a Lakota, which is part of the Sioux tribe, one of the largest Plains Indian tribes. He did not seek out to be head of the tribe. In fact, Indian culture does really not lend itself to organized resistance, which is part of the reason the Indians were not successful. They had no command structure. By all accounts, Crazy Horse shunned the trappings of chiefdom, usually preferring to wear a single feather, but he was passionate about defending his homelands from the changes which were being required by the white man. I'm checking out of the Alpine Inn where I stayed last night in Custer, South Dakota. It was the highest rated hotel I saw on the internet, but I have to say the rooms weren't much, but it was charming. However, I was blown away by this internet speed. It's by far the fastest internet speed I've ever experienced at any hotel anywhere. The Custer State Park features a drive-through loop where you can drive through many bison. After leaving Custer State Park, it doesn't take but a few miles before you begin to approach the Crazy Horse Memorial. Because of its scale, you can see it for many miles. I thought the visitor center and the various exhibits were very well done. The memorial was commissioned by Chief Henry Standing Bear, and he found a man named Korzak Zielkowski, who was a Polish orphan from New York, who had had some commercial success, and after traveling there decided to make this his life's work. He knew it could not be finished in his lifetime, but he started in 1948 and was still barely underway when he died in 1982 at age 74. The work continues with his children and grandchildren and paid contractors, and they have famously declined to take any government money because they feel like it would come with too many strings attached to the telling of the Indian history and Indian culture. This is a model of what the finished memorial will look like. And based on the relatively few workers I saw on site, it was going to take generations to do. After leaving the Crazy Horse Memorial, I drove over to Mount Rushmore, which is a well done, as the National Park Service usually does, tasteful, well-maintained memorial. ample modern parking. The attendant noticed my Tesla and directed me to an area that had a number of chargers. So I plugged Snowball in and let her get some electricity while I walked up and took in Mount Rushmore. It actually doesn't take very long to see Mount Rushmore, although there are some extracurricular activities you can do and some hikes that you can take. It's a very impressive carving. Took a picture of my old state flag, Georgia. As you may recall, Georgia was one of several states that had a Confederate battle flag as part of its state flag. That was changed in 1953, which I agree with because it's an active flag representing all of the people. I don't agree with the cancel culture trying to eliminate all of our history, which is a totally different issue in my view. Mount Rushmore was designed and sculpted by Gutzon Borglum, who had sculpted many important American statesmen and generals, including several in the rotunda at the Capitol. A interesting backstory is that he was selected to design and sculpt the vast sculpture at Stone Mountain in Georgia, which is the largest exposed granite rock in the world. And he was actually fired because of his KKK ties, which were relatively well documented. And the face was erased and started over again. I thoroughly enjoyed both of those memorials, and now am driving up to Rapid City, where I'll spend the night and then head east from there. I took a few pictures overlooking Rapid City, which, as you can see, is relatively flat, contrasted to the Black Hills where the sculptures are located.